work. This will be better. That's kind of a hot spot there. We had to fix that. Now to get back in focus, there we go. Let's get going. We're live. It is 12:31 in the afternoon, not in the morning. So this is not technically not a morning wake-up call or morning motivation for your projects, but get your projects done. I've got lots of them. I have so many projects. Today I want to talk about some dyno results on a 4.6 liter 2-valve non-PI motor. And I did a lot of testing on these. I wrote a book on this stuff way back, did lots of tests and stories for the guys at Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forwards, and they've appeared in different videos and things. But normally, at least the ones that we focused on the most were after we did all the ported heads and cam and stuff. So what we did was I got a 1998 4.6 non-PI 2-valve motor before they went to the PI stuff, because 98 was the last year. It was rated at 225 horsepower from the factory, and then they jumped up to 260 on the PI stuff. I got one of those from a wrecking yard, and it was the first modular Ford motor that I did extensive testing on, and it worked out good. In fact, at that time, nobody else did modular Ford stuff, and certainly not at West Tech. There were guys doing chassis dyno stuff, but nobody ran them on the engine dyno. So this was kind of a cool deal. But I started out with a non-PI stuff, but I focus on after we took that short block and then we put ported PI heads from my buddy Brian Tully when he was at Total Engine Airflow. They ported up a set of the PI heads. We put a PI intake manifold on it. We did throttle bodies and blowers and turbos, oh my, all kinds of stuff. But what happened before that? So I don't cover that too often. So what I want to do is focus on the non-PI stuff. In the last couple of videos, we've talked about the small block Ford, the small block Chevy, and then a whole series of testing that we did, step by step. And so I did that actually with this non-PI motor before we started making major modifications to it. We tried a camshaft, we ran nitrous on it, we tried the throttle body elbow thing, the AccuFab piece, and tuning and timing and all kinds of things. So what I want to do is go over that. So we'll start off with our 4.6 liter 2-valve motor. Again, this was a 1998 non-PI. We had it configured on the engine dyno with a Mazir electric water pump, typically the way that we want it. This one already had hooker headers on it and collector extensions. We had an optimized tune on it. We had the stock throttle body and elbow on it. We had we didn't run it with a mass air meter because we ran it with a fast XFI management system, and we didn't. We ran a section of tubing and then a radius entry or a filter on it. And we ran it in this configuration the way that I got it basically from the engine dyno, just like I said, headers and Mazir pump and stuff. And when we ran this non-PI motor, initially it made 252 horsepower and 336 foot-pounds of torque. But what we did is, and this was with Tom when he was at West Tech, did all the tuning on this thing. He played with stuff. So we hadn't ever run one of those before. So, and we didn't have what we wanted to do was adjust the timing and air fuel. And so he did all that. He added timing, tell us stop making power the way that we normally do, adjust the air fuel. And eventually he was able to tune a little bit more out of it. It got up to about 260 horsepower. We'll take a look and see where that is. Yeah, 260 horsepower and 341 or 2 foot-pounds of torque. So better because of the tune, and you want to kind of start that way. But the other initial startup and run might give you an idea of, I honestly think that's probably even more than the factory tune would make. The factory tune's fairly conservative. But that gives you an idea. So there's almost always, when you run a motor, like if you have it in the car and you run it on a chassis dyno with a factory tune in it, you can almost always get more power from it because they have to tune it at wide open throttle based on the fact that they think somebody is going to run bad gas in it and lug it and do all sorts of terrible things to it. So they have to make it safe. If you can put 91 octane in it, which is what we did, and then you can tune it accordingly and try to optimize the power, this is kind of more what you get. So then what we did was we took the motor, and after we had the optimized tune with the headers, then we started making modifications to it. So what we did was installed an AccuFab throttle body and elbow. He has got the ability looking pieces that are really nice. Those are very, very popular for the 4.6s back in the day. Bigger throttle bodies, kind of a natural thing that came from the 5-liter Mustang days. The factory throttle bodies are obviously smaller or not sufficient, especially on the 5-liter. But on the 4.6, they were actually started out already being bigger. I think that this was a 75 throttle body. And the power increased from 260 horsepower to 271 horsepower. So it got about 11 horsepower. It was pretty good. So we're at 341. And torque didn't jump up dramatically, 346. But the horsepower, and as you would expect from an airflow gain, which the throttle body and elbow does, you get more of a gain of power at the top of the rev range, because that's where the airflow, that's where you're putting the airflow to use, the extra airflow potential of the throttle body and the elbow. And that works out. And then what we've done, I've tested this combination, the stock throttle body and elbow versus an AccuFab piece, or lots of people sold them, BBK and a bunch of different guys. And then what happens is, just like with almost any throttle body test, the more powerful the combination you're testing it on, the greater the gains you get. Because you have to put the combination in a position to benefit from what that throttle body and elbow will actually flow and how much power it will support. Otherwise, you're just asking it to support kind of stock power levels. So the next upgrade was going from after we put the elbow on, we wanted to try a camshaft. So what we installed was a comp cam. And this was an Extreme Energy 274 cam. So it was a 274H, meaning it was a non-PI cam. It was designed for the non-PI setup, meaning it was 500 lift and not 550 lift like the other PI cams were. So this was a good cam, but it did lose power down low. But once we installed this cam, we were able to make 301 or 2 horsepower. And peak torque stayed, pretty consistent, 346 foot-pounds. It just shifted it higher in the rev range. And like I said, we started this thing at 2,500 and ran it from 2,500 to 5,600. And we ran into, a power loss. And I certainly saw this when I ran that particular camshaft in my non-PI 98 Mustang on the street when we were doing chassis dyno testing with it. We went from the stock cam to that cam with headers and things on it that we had done before. And it was not ideal for driving. It was because the area where you're using it a lot while you're driving, that's the area where you have some power loss there. And so it's just not a good combination. Actually, on this one, I kind of wish we would have started out with a smaller 262 cam, and that would have been good. But, this is what happened when we ran the test. So our next test involved adding nitrous to it. So we added a Zex wet, EFI single fogger, mounted it in front of the throttle body like we have on other combinations, injected the nitrous, and we put the kit in the way that they specified from the instructions that were supplied with the kit. So we put the jetting in that they supplied, and this was a 100 shot. We put the jetting in that they supplied, and then we ran the line. Since this was an EFI kit, it had small fuel jetting because it had lots of fuel pressure, more than a carburetor. So we ran the line off of our regulator and used it to feed the fuel solenoid and put it in the way that they specified. We took 4 degrees of timing away, and we were rewarded with a good gain. We went from 300 horsepower to 380 horsepower, and they jumped up to 475 foot-pounds of torque. And a lot of that is going to be the engagement. We engaged this thing at like 36 or 3,700 RPM. So all of this stuff really is kind of happening before the 52 mark. So that tells us that any gain we get there is going to be greater in torque than it is in horsepower. But what happened on this is when we ran it, we got a good hit initially on the torque, and the power curve did good. Like I said, went up to 480 horsepower. But then after about 4,500 out to 5,500, the horsepower curve fell off. And the reason that it did that is because this thing was really, really rich. And that's not uncommon for nitrous kits. They like to make them rich and so that they can make them safe. But what we did was adjust the jetting. We didn't adjust the nitrous jetting, which you also can do, but we adjusted the fuel jetting to get the air fuel curve more in a realistic area, like 11.5, 11.8, somewhere in there. And then after our tune, the combination not only made more peak power, it got right up to 400 horsepower and right at 500 foot-pounds of torque. So we did gain our 100 horsepower, which is kind of to be expected. But it also gained a lot of power, like out at 5,400 RPM, just on the tune by fixing the air fuel. It went from 350 horsepower to 386. So just on the tune, we picked up as much as 36 horsepower just by leaning this thing out and not having it have, so much excessive fuel, because it was in the tens out here at the top. And the nice thing about having fuel injection, in our case with the nitrous, we did this primarily with jet, but we can also do it with a fuel injection. Okay, let's take fuel away also from 5,000 to 5,500 so we can dial that in. But you'd only be dialing it in with that nitrous. And I like to adjust the nitrous fueling, if we can, by fuel pressure going to the jet and or the jet itself, so that your NA fueling all stays consistent. And we did that when we were tuning this thing NA. So starting off, we went from, we started off at 252 horsepower with our 4.6 liter 2 valve. And after cams, a nitrous, and an AccuFab elbow, we were up at 400 horsepower and 500 foot-pounds of torque. So it did pretty well. The next thing after that, we didn't, I didn't take this combination any further on the non-PI stuff. We would eventually run turbos on them and all kinds of things. But after this is when we started looking at doing a ported head upgrade. I'm like, well, I'm not really going to port the non-PI heads in this combination. And that's when I talked to Brian and said, hey, look, I want to do a head swap, because the ported, the PI heads are not only, they're going to be ported, so they're going to have a lot more airflow. They're going to support a lot more power, but they're also going to raise the compression, which is also going to be good. So it's kind of a win-win. And that's what we did. And we eventually pushed this thing up from 300 horsepower to 400 horsepower with the ported heads. I think we still use that ported heads, PI intake manifold, the elbow, the right headers, and all that stuff. And so it was a pretty good power gain on this non-PI combination. So let's see what you guys got going on. This might be 100, but it's going to be 100 the other way. We'll see. Oh, no, it won't be 100 because Admiral's here. Prestige is here. Is the 4.6 liter 2 valve Ford the best motor ever made? And we're off and running. Eric, Tim, Adrian, Nick, what's going on? How's it going, Richard? I've got a 2011 Crown Vic, so this should be really interesting. An 11 is that a 3 valve, or is that still a 2 valve? What is that? You should do another update on the 8.1 Vortec. You mean the big block is what you want to see? More big block testing? I plan on running that again. We're going to do a ported head on it and then boost again. I have a 75 millimeter BBK throttle body. Yeah, you have to do the throttle body and the elbow, because the opening on the stock elbow also is not big enough. Even with the mismatch in ports, the PI manifold on a non-PI works really well. There's no water leak when you do that? Queensland, what's going on? 250 torque is a good number. Yeah, it was always over 250 foot-pounds. The 250 horsepower though is the number. I think that this thing was always, where are we at here on our base? All about the base. Yeah, 335 foot-pounds. So that's the way that was rated by Ford too. It is rated at a lot more torque than horsepower. Pretty typical for OE applications for these. The 5 liter Ford was like that. All the tune port motors were like that. Starting with base, at least, if you can get the torque to around 300, having a great day at the track. Yes. 274 cam, yep. Although I think that judging by the the way that the 274 responded compared to the 262, I think we would have been close there with the 262 and we would have picked up more low speed power. I wonder how many inches of vacuum that MPI pulled with a stock lower manifold than a 274 cam. Yeah, the 274 cam would definitely, it definitely had, it knocked out a bunch of, a bunch of vacuum. I'm sure it knocked out 5 or 6 inches. Richard, what nitrous would you hit the, well, what RPM would you hit the nitrous in your Mustang? I have holding 5 liter with standard pistons and putting 100 shot on it. Just worried about the torque down low. Well, since a 5 liter Mustang made peak power, like right where it's going to make a whole bunch of torque too, I think I ran it from 3,500 or 4,000 out to 6,000, but that's really beyond where the peak power is. But it seemed to pull pretty well though. 98 Mustang, you say? Yeah, I had a 98 GT with about a bajillion miles on it. Got a tune that reduces time a couple of degrees for 100 shot. Don't spray below 3,000. Will, Richard, just thought I'd let you know I've been driving my budget Mark 8 GT35 build to and from work for the last 3 weeks. Makes 10 PSI, 42 light injectors, 98 Cobra intake. Oh, very cool. How is the GT35 doing? Is it working? Is the motor all stock other than the turbo? My mod motor sense went off. That's right. Your Spidey sense was tingling, right? It loves boost and already has hurt a few other people's feelings. Her channel definitely helped me with the modification. Cool. I'm glad it helped. It's nice to actually, we always recommend, the Imperial, smaller turbos and smaller cams, and people are much happier. Yep, modular power is in the house. Joyce has got to be here too, right? Yep. Double J. Just a 100 shot on 304 will be fine. The stock pistons and gaps, but if you're using a bunch of bananas intakes, yeah, those are cool looking though. Richard, have you ever tried a PI intake on a non-PI head? I don't think I have. I think we did do a PI intake on a non-PI ported head that was welded up so that it wouldn't leak. I think the guys from back in the day from Ford Performance Solutions did that. Because I thought that there was a mismatch with the water passage or something. Taylor, what's going on? 2011 is a 2V. Okay. Best modular motor. What contributes to a motor making more torque than horsepower? Is it more intake runner length? It's all of those things. It's the 3 big things. It's cam timing, runner length, and head flow. And primarily with those, it's the very mild cam timing. Best motor ever made is a small block Ford. Okay. I have so many 4.6s. Everything I read is fully ported non-PI heads only fall short on the exhaust flow when compared to the fully ported PI heads. This is with offset. What's an offset retainer? 600 lift. Intake and exhaust manifold design account for probably 60-70% of where a motor makes power. What would you recommend when starting from a PI? It's the same thing. The PI, you can put cams in it, go a long way, cams and springs. And I don't think I mentioned that we changed the springs in that too with the camshaft. And then the elbow and headers and tune, all of that's good. Really the best thing for a 4.62 valve, whether it's a PI or a non-PI, is to add boost to it. Did they make an all aluminum 5.4 mod motor? Yeah, in the Ford GT they did. And then later they put that block also in the GT500. 462 valve is very reliable. It doesn't make much power stock as shown. It, oddly enough, it made about the same power as a 5-liter Mustang does. There's no water leak when you RTV the crossover. I've had my 96 GT going with PI manifold for 6 years. Used to deliver pizza. Cool. John, the earlier GT500s were iron block. I got the elbow. I'm going to try to get my transmission together. I have a 4R70. In your experience, what's the safe rear wheel limit of a stock 4-valve short block? It's 4-digit stuff. He's an NPI long block I had laying around the trick flow intake when I ate a bearing on the motor built the other day. Uh-oh. My hydraulic lash adjusters are not good. I have a Roush 360R on the 462 valve and love it. Can we get a big bang 462 valve? Yeah, that needs to happen, right? I think I remember hearing something about the Navigator engine being aluminum. The one that I had was an iron block. Uh-oh, reckless, but you're back. That's what's important. Got to do a coolant tube in the valley from a PI motor too when swapping. Yep. The runners protrude deeper into the valley. Use of the PI intake gaskets too. Yep. I still want trick flow heads on one of the 4.6s. Yeah, those are good. I know the guy that designed those. Prestige, did they, when they did the changeover, when they had the aluminum blocks in the GT500s, that was when they switched over to the 5.8? The aluminum modular block was also in F-150s and Navigators. Installed spring height on the non-PI shorter than the PI, so use of offset retainer lets you run the higher lift. Oh, okay. So you're doing, when you said offset, offset usually to me means side to side. So you're talking about a plus 500 or a minus 500 or plus 50 or minus 50 keeper or retainer setup. Can't wait till I finally put the twins on my Mustang. I'm just having a hard time affording the remaining parts, like turbo headers, intercooler, wastegate, tube, front clip. That's a lot of stuff. Richard, I missed the QJet live. My Mild 350, a factory iron manifold. I cut the carb pad to look like an RPM air gap. Mild porting it, pull strong across the RPM range, better than the base performer. Okay. It typically, when you cut the divider out like that, it typically loses signal to the carburetor. So it usually hurts low speed response, but it helps up top. So Savage, you think a 462 valve will get to 1200? I was referring to the stock 4V rotating assembly, not the block itself. No, I'm not talking about the block. I'm talking about a 4-valve rotating assembly with ring gap will go to 1,000 horsepower. Have you ever seen SVO early 4.6 castings? I don't know what those are. I got a bone stock 5.3 Gen 3 with an LS1 intake, planning on trying to blow it up with a 200 shot. We've run more than that. So if you have the tune right, you should actually be able to run that pretty successfully. It's going to be hard if you've got a single fogger blowing into that intake manifold. 200 is getting into the problem area. I think a 4.62 valve will kick a rod at 800. Might keep the bigger cam in the Hemi to see what happens. 231, 237. That should be a good cam in a Hemi. Love to see powder rods do 1,000 horsepower. What are the rods in a, what's a Gen 3 LS rod? I'm a Ford guy, but I still need to vote no. All right. It's that word best. Best and thoughts. What are your best thoughts? 462 valve, the best mod motor ever. 75% are saying no. Fun fact, 462 valve was available with an aluminum block by chance between 2001 and 2005 in Explorers. Really? Did they just not have iron blocks available? Picked up 0.06 in the 330 and 10th and a half in the 8th. I think the small runners help velocity a bit. Opening the plenum does help the top end. Wish I had access to a dyno. Did you, when you did that, did you tune it with a air fuel meter or anything? Michael, is that supposed to say Dan is biased? Also in the 2V navigators. Do you think that the Prestige, do you think that the aluminum blocks are as strong as the iron blocks? SVO 2-valve cylinder head offered over 200 CFM through the intake port way back in the day, similar to NPI as far as port shape. I remember the Ford Racing heads that they had in the catalog. I don't think I ever tested any of those though. Some Explorers got aluminum blocks originally meant for aviator production. I believe it was due to the shortage of iron blocks. Okay. I don't think I've ever tried going. I mean, we've been to 700 or more on the 2-valve stuff with the stock, the factory crank rod pistons and block. But on the only thing we ever took up to 1,000 horsepower was that Cobra motor, but it has forged internals in it. I do have a 3-valve, which I like a lot, but I wouldn't call it the best either. Whatever the best is, I've never owned or driven one. It's just whatever you have. I'm kind of curious to see what a 462 valve would do in terms of peak power, in terms of big bang, big bang kind of power. Big bang-a-lang. Gen 3 LS rods are powdered, but they're beefier than 4.6 late gen rods. Okay. Just tuned in with a can full of jets and rods at the track, both before and after the intake mods. No air fill meter, just in the middle of what it wanted in the track and needed on the road. Okay, cool. That's good that you had all the tuning bits for the Q-Jet. Are you going to put everything fresh in it? No, that's not how Big Bang stuff is. Big Bang is junkyard stuff. Is it a good running junkyard motor, and then you take it apart and clean it, and then you put the stock crank rods and pistons that came out of it back in? You just change the ring gap and then run it that way. We will probably clean the block and stuff, and then I usually take when we take the rings out to gap them, I also take the oil rings out and clean them out because they usually get gunk in them, and sometimes they want to seize the oil ring and stop it from rotating. But we clean all that stuff up. And then I usually have the deck surface just do a cleanup on that, just so that we get good head gasket sealing, because I don't want to blow a head gasket because it's warped or something. And then we put MLS gaskets on it. Same thing with the heads. The heads would be ported heads that have been not milled, but surfaced, so that we just want a good sealing there, and ARP head studs and MLS gaskets on it, and then some kind of cams in it, and then probably would do a higher RPM intake manifold like an Edelbrock Victor Jr. or something. But all the stock stuff will be stock stuff. It'll just be old stock stuff, seasoned. I'm a jet hoarder. 462 valve, I reckon it would do just under 1,000 before it lets go. Okay. Let's see, Johnny. Given a choice, would you do a build on a 2002 Mustang 2V or swap for a Lincoln Aviator 4-valve? If you feel comfortable with the swap, including all of the things that go along with it, like taking the motor in and out is the easy part of it. But how are you going to wire that and make that work? That would be the concern for me, because I'm not that strong on that stuff, because I haven't done a lot of those kinds of swaps. But a 4-valve obviously is going to make more power. I have a 95 Mustang 5-liter, stage 1 TF SET tune, stage 1 cam, Edelbrock replica Typhoon, pushing 320 wheel horsepower. That's good. That's more than I thought it would make. If I get bigger injectors, can I add a Pro Charger or a turbo? Yeah, you have to have enough fuel. You have to have a pump and injectors to support the boost. So you can pick either one of those. And then have it tuned, obviously, for boost as well. I still think the Aviator is the best junkyard motor. Paid $400 for mine. Cool. Richard, a lot of time cleaning up and say a timing chain gaskets is all high mileage. Engine needs to live twice more. Yeah, I've run lots of these, so I'm pretty familiar with them. But I doubt that we're going to break a chain or something on the running it at power. It is going to run a bit more RPM than stock. Like I said, in this one, we were making peak power at, I don't know, 5,000 or something. So it's going to run 6,500 or something, I would imagine, to make the power where we want to make it. Building a T76 351 Windsor, 60 over. Use aluminum GT40 heads. Okay. Holley high ram for looks. What cam would you recommend for stock to small stall? For sleeper Crown Vic. If you want it to still work with a stock stall converter, then pick one of the smaller comp cams. Pick a 258 probably, or 260 kind of thing. Fjord. 256 would be a 212, 218, or a 262 would be a 218, 224. So either one of those would be good for a driver. Couldn't find a 268 or 278 cam for the sleeper Vic. When Visor did his write-up about it, he mentioned the 2-valve would want a 1.0. The 2-valve head would want a particular LSA. But there's piston to valve clearance issue. It'd be interesting to see how much of a difference it would make. It wants that LSA regardless of what other specs you have on the camshaft. I don't really understand that. I'm shooting for an 04 model Aviator motor with 9-thread heads, though these heads are my texted block and you. Okay, you're getting into all blocky stuff. Mud motor, that's a good price. Aussie motors are expensive. I have a 340 liter power pump on a deadhead system for nearly 3 years now. Yeah, we always run deadhead stuff on the engine dyno. Even though Eric said he doesn't like that. He goes, I know you guys do that all the time on the engine dyno. I'm like, I know, but it obviously works. I haven't been doing it once or twice. I mean, I've been doing it for years and years. Converted my 8849 GT to MAF, including the pin change and connecting the VSS and fuel pump monitor. Cool. Just swapped an Aviator 4-valve. DC heads in my 01 Cobra. Well worth it. It feels a lot quicker than my 01 Cobra engine. So you swap from one set of 4-valve heads to another set of 4-valve heads? On the chain thing, I was more thinking of overhead cam with all the sloppy mess. No one ever seems to service as needed. I think that it killed my buddy's 3.7 liter Jeep. Yeah, and some of these might have. I think that my 462 valve, the non-PI motor, the 98, I think it had 167 or 80, something like that, 1,000 miles on it. I think that's, I can't remember exactly. They gave me a tag that came with the motor because we bought it from a wrecking yard, but I think that it was fairly high mileage, but it still worked good. In fact, we did a lot of stuff to that motor. That thing had a lot of pulls on it. Aviator's all aluminum cast crank 4-valve. Aviator does have a fancy dual runner. Yeah, I've run one of those manifolds before. Having a dual runner manifold should add low speed power. I need to go back now and look. It's been a long time since I looked at that intake test. Arden, your 462 valve had too much torque for the CV axles? Thinking about porting the exhaust out of my Eagle heads. However, I'm confident the intake doesn't need it. So you think just porting the exhaust is going to help? Need a big bang aviator motor. How's our poll doing? 75% Tavos. Yeah, 3/4. No, that's a hard pass on the on the best motor. David's CAM program goes by valve size and chamber size and flow, along with the cubic inches and desired RPM, and valve size, chamber shape dictate the LSA and overlap. Okay. So whether you pick a camshaft that's a 206 or a 200 or a 230, they all want the same overlap. And and attending valve events. Behind, but GT500 went to 5.4 aluminum block in 2011. 2013 was 5.8 with the plasma lining. Julius, that's big money for those modular forward 5.4s. $3,800 is the best motor. That is a good one. They made a lot of those. I don't have an update on the marathon yet, Eric. I'm still waiting to hear back from Chad, his availability. Got my aluminum F-150 short block for $350. Nice. Yeah, Prestige, the FR500 sure wanted to rev in short runner, guys. Is the 462L the best motor? The best. I should have put quotes on that, right? That's why RPM range is considered. He goes with a small LSA and higher duration to expand the RPM range. At least that's how I see it. Okay, you're free to use whatever method that you think is correct for choosing your camshaft. You ever tested block hugger style headers? I don't think I have. I normally see those on small block Chevys, but I don't see how a block hugger header is. It's essentially just a shorty header. I don't see how that's going to be any different than a shorty header, honestly. And you have that in there, but a long tube is definitely not going to be that. It's going to be better than a block hugger, and it's going to be better than a shorty, and it's going to be better than a mid. Julius, LS1s for 7,500. I need to send you guys over a bunch, right? How much are V12 LS is selling for over there? Didn't those Australian guys make V12s also? Crazyfoot, you finally blew the head gasket at 315,000 miles on your 98 F-150. So Eric, you're a fan of the 3.8. Now, is it 3.8 or the 3800? Do you like the later version or the kind of Grand National version? I mean, the Grand National itself is obviously cool, but any interest in ammonia engines? I'm not sure I know what that is. Like somebody in the modding community converted gas engine just for demonstrating purposes. If not anything else, I see Toyota in the news doing it. I don't know that I have the technology that Toyota does to make something like that work. I'm not familiar with running a motor on ammonia. I think we set a record for no LS questions. After 2019, prices increase and there's very few junkyards anymore. Of course, I can think of things to talk about when I'm hiking and have to stop to type so I don't break an ankle. It's good. You should not be paying attention to your screen when you're hiking because that's how you get attacked by cougars. What's the highest RPM you've ever turned a 462 valve? I think with the short runner stuff, I think we were near 7,000 on that one, maybe. But not any higher than that. Julius, the Aussie V12, they didn't do it first. I know that you want to represent for your Australian guys, but I know where they got that. I'm not sure how much different the engine is itself. Seems not much of from a glance around. I just don't know how are they doing the fueling and stuff, and what are they doing to ignite it and all that, and what are they storing it in? Like, what's the fuel tank situation? I know the 4.6 isn't the best engine, especially non-PI, but to me, it still sounds like it's good. Crazy to me that coyotes and stuff are so undersquared but turn good RPM. It's almost like bore and stroke and things like rod ratio don't determine RPM. Biggest advantage of overhead cam is not having to route runners around the push rods. That can help. And what we were hoping, I can tell you what we were hoping for as a Ford guy, as a Mustang owner, that when they went from the modular Ford to the, or went from the conventional Windsor-based Ford, the 302, to the 4.6, it was overhead cam. We're like, yeah, we're going to get some RPM. And like, no, it's still a 5,000 RPM motor. We were kind of disappointed. Yeah, you can. You could overbuild. You could get attacked by a Sasquatch. Using the 2V and a Vic on the dirt track, stock tune, big radiator. I can't keep a head gasket on it. Do you have localized hotspots? Like, do you have air pockets in it? Like, what is the tune? What is the timing? What is the fuel? Do you have a bad injector? There are all kinds of things to look at. Yeah, not sure how many things in the fuel system need to change so the ammonia doesn't eat it. Ottomans don't care about RPM until you start getting into the sane RPM. Decent fully balanced cranks and rods. It's all in the valve train. Yeah, Julius. Jordan have heads and are block bend decked. Turns out it might need an air dam under the radiator support. That plastic piece that the OEMs put under there is an important part of the cooling system. Piston speed is a concern. But is piston speed a concern? If you look at these 500, 600, 700, 800, 900 inch motors and the strokes on these things and the RPM they're turning and the piston speed that they're doing. I remember talking to Kazi about piston speed. And he said, we just stopped calculating it. He said, we used to worry about, 4,000 is too much. 4,500 is certainly too much. 5,000 is too much. And then we just stopped talking about it. Overall, my experience with 4.6 is a good one. My experience with them has been good. I can tell you that I did all of the stuff on the 98 car and we got it to make 300 at the tire, which was no easy feat. It took a lot, took everything with a stock short block. But it was so much better when we just put a Kenny bell on it. It made it a lot more fun. I just wanted to match the exhaust ports to the headers. Do you think that that's critical? Do you think that the exhaust, that the header port is the ideal size for the exhaust coming out of the head? Shaking my head at piston speed. Yeah. 5.4s have a decent amount of piston speed too with that much stroke. The reason old school lost say short strokes rev better is because back in the day, the longer stroke was customer made. Stock parts live longer and work better with cylinder head flow available. Well, if you look at dedicated race motors like Formula One, they are short stroke, bigger bore. They're not doing that specifically on the bottom end to make it so it will rev. They're doing it so that they can maximize the airflow at the engine speed that they want to run, because you got to a kind of a specific torque output. But if you keep pushing that higher and higher in RPM, you keep making more and more power, even though you're making the same torque. So a bigger bore affords you the airflow that's necessary to support that power level up at the top. But everybody thinks, oh yeah, it's got a 2-inch stroke and a 4-inch bore or whatever. Yeah, that's why it revs. Well, yes and no. 4.6 question. I installed a 262 AH cams, advanced the cam by 2 degrees. So my question, first of all, is why would you advance the cams? Did you test them the way that they were and then advance them and then pick up more power? This is in a truck and tuning for more torque, and it seemed to help a lot. Am I onto something, or would it hurt performance? You have no way to measure how it was before that. You only have one data point. So it might be good. It might be that you, by advancing it, and actually, as we found out in the 4.6 valve stuff, making them the same side to side is worth quite a bit of power. And then maybe advancing them is worth power. But the cams probably already have advanced ground into them. So it might be that you're over advancing them. You might be at the point where you're trading power somewhere else or not getting gains. But the only way to know that is if you actually test it both ways. Not too worried about cougars. My part of Illinois, bobcats. Yeah, it'd be very, very weird for a bobcat to attack a person unless it was a little tiny person. So overbuilt, no Sasquatches. Thing is, we live in a boost world now. It doesn't matter about. Yeah, I mean, a high RPM motor sounds really good, and one that's like has crispy throttle response. All of that's good. There's no denying that. There's no denying really cool different types of NA motors, and all that's good. For most people, though, the route to getting lots of power isn't that. It is cheap boost. Time for crazy thought of the day. Lima 2.3 came from 200 256. Volvo dual cam swaps to 2.3. I wonder if I could make a double overhead cam 256. Does Volvo not have a 4-valve 6-cylinder already? On another stream, you mentioned that the Cast 351 crank could handle 500 horsepower. Yes, very, very easily. Do you think I should invest in forged pistons, or can I save there too? For 500 horsepower, you're gonna my T56 750. Oh, you want to? So you don't want to make 500 horsepower. You want to make 700 horsepower, right? The thing will do that. If you're putting the motor together and freshening it up, I would definitely put forged pistons in it. But we've made lots more than you're trying to make there with a junkyard 351 with ring gap in it. 462 valve is better than a 4.8 than a 4.8 LS. That's going to be a pretty hard sell, I think. If you look at these results, actually a 4.6 PI motor. Now, 4.6 PI motor is still going to be 30 or 40 down from a 4.8. Never forget the phone call to Mahovitz. Yeah, John's a good guy, and he's really sharp. You ought to do a line of valve cover decals, T-shirts, air cleaners. Powered by Rich. Piston speed is a concern when trying to turn extremely high RPM. This is one of the advantages of short stroke, large bore for doing extreme RPM. It's not going to matter to an LS guy. And it's also not going to matter for almost any RPM beyond that up into the stuff that we're talking about with Formula One. Truck RPM power for lower RPM power. Yep. Eric, I will be on tonight. And why you want to get me, especially the alloy blocks. Now has Kenny Bell on it. Having the Kenny Bell on there was a lot of fun. It was made the car a lot more fun to drive, and it sounded really good. It was a little louder than I would have wanted for my choice because it had a X pipe and stuff on it. It had a good exhaust on it. I think it had a Magnaflow exhaust on it, which I really liked. It sounded good. We got mountain lions in the Midwest. That's good. Mountain lions are cool. You know, from a distance. Let's see. Ford retarded the cams 4 degrees on the 300 and 460 truck engines. Yeah, if you advance that back, if the cam timing is wrong and it's retarded and you advance it, then you can gain it. But some people think that just always advancing the cam adds more low speed power. Well, it can't keep doing that. At some point, it's not going to keep doing that. And so do you have all the advance in it that you need? And you don't know that unless you test it. You know, they destroyed a 6-liter with a 4.8 crank, but is it possible to stroke a 4.8 and use the 6.0 crank? If you put a 6.0 crank in a 4.8, it just becomes a 5.3. That's all that a 5.3 is. I don't want to meet any of the big cats. What's your setup in your 98? What 98 do I have? No way the 462 valve is better than the 4.8. My Cast crank 351 makes 500 on the motor, and I spray with a 400 on 2 kits. Has lived for many years now. Just don't have any detonation. Yeah, that makes sense. The crank is not something that I usually worry about. It's the other things if you're worried about part strength. But we've all been, and I'm part of the reason for this, because on all of the 5-liter Ford stuff and 351s and all the small block Fords and small block Chevys and stuff that we did, it was always, yes, okay, we're going to build a motor. It's going to get a steel crank. It's going to get Ford rods and Ford pistons. That's good. But at the power level that we were at, it didn't need that. It didn't have to have that. How much power can be made with stock plastic manifold and naturally aspirated? Jordan, what engine are you talking about? Oh, the 98 Mustang. Okay, the non-PI motor. Arden, so you're talking about breaking the rear end during decel? Slowpoke, so you modified your stock crank with Chevy journals? Where am I located? I'm in California. I want the 3800 custom grind cam that you have, but it needs to say Super Richie on it. The 98 GT had, and I thought I covered all of that, but it had a stock bottom end, but we rebuilt one. We put new stuff together. In fact, I did a test where we ran the old one and then we swapped all of the stock heads and cam and intake manifold and all that stuff and put it on the new block. So I just wanted to test and see what the new block would do. And I don't remember it being very much power when I did that. So I went to a lot of trouble to make the same power from what I thought was a worn out short block, but it turned out it was still making about the same power. But it eventually got the 274 cams. It got ported non-PI heads. It got a Super Richie mic custom intake manifold, which is what allowed it to make that kind of power, because it wasn't going to do it with, I didn't ever put we didn't want to run PI stuff on it. I didn't want to do a PI swap on it. So it had to be non-PI stuff. So it had a dedicated intake manifold. It had ported heads. It had cams. It had long tube headers. It had a MagnaFlow exhaust. We may have had, I think we had a mass air meter on it and stuff too. Lions and pumas, oh my, and bears. Yeah, Ben Strader's running lots of RPM, and I hope that he puts better heads on it and runs even more. Richard, if you had a 4.8 limit, well, then it would be a 4.8 displacement, some sort of Formula One base motor, right? If all you're changing is if your whole limitation is displacement, then it would be that. It would be a Formula One that's twice as big as they currently are. Got Sam Squatches. We built my daughter's quarter midget engines, and we retired the cam gear to retard the camshaft. Retarded the cam gear to, we retired the cam to retard the camshaft to hold the valve shut longer to build more compression. It puts power band where you want it. Okay, and you could also do that without retarding the camshaft, just by grinding the camshaft, so it already has the thing that you want in it. New other guy's engine, the 3.7 Mercruiser. Yeah, that's not new. We've talked about that for years with the that has the 460 big block head on. Those are cool. If anybody wants manly forge rods and all the ARP bolts to build a 2-valve, Dustin has them for sale. Richard, have you ever had a 462 valve that was able to shift at 7,000? We've run them to 7,000, but all of the ones that I've seen don't make power there unless you have a very short runner intake manifold and lots of camshaft and lots of valve spring. Two 100 journals on that crank. It seems like a lot of work to do to a cast crank. What's the best way to tune my 05 GT3 valve? You have to take it to somebody that does that kind of tuning. (2008) 462 valve. How much power can be made with a stock intake and without boost or nitrous? I don't know. We've done more than 400, and with that stock PI intake manifold, it did have a different elbow and throttle body on it, and headers and ported heads and cam. And there's certainly more to be had there if you wanted to get crazy with camshaft. But eventually, you're looking at a problem with the combination of putting too much cam in a manifold that wants to run in 1 RPM range, and then the heads and intake manifold that want to run in a different RPM range. Yeah, overbuilt. I'm looking forward to the Trophy 4-cylinder too. I just want to run it with the Torque Storm. There's about 4,500 pound-feet of wheel torque measured from the brake torque neutral drop. Where are you measuring that, or how are you measuring that number? And shock loading something is not the same as producing a power output. You guys have more lizards in Ohio than your mom has in South Florida? We saw a lot of lizards and snakes when we were in Florida. More snakes, actually. Oh, you knew a guy, Slowpoke? Have you ever done a Terminator build, an SN95 with a Whipple? Are you talking about an 0304 Cobra motor? I've done a lot on those. I haven't done an 03 Cobra motor and put more compression in it, but you can do that. You can combine that with the twin screw, which is what the Whipple is. We're going to end our poll at 74% saying no. And on that note, it is time to go. It's officially an hour, but I will be back tonight.